Yo, this is the Ancient Texan. It's May 28th, the Friday. It's a little drizzly here. A couple of comments, mostly environmental. Um, there's a container ship in Sri Lanka that is offshore, bursting into flames, and microplastic balls are washing up onto the shore, and oil. They're trying to figure out how to put the tanker out. But I assume all of you have seen the pictures of microplastics and just plastics in general. There's big, you know, huge miles across, tens of miles across of these big pools of plastic in the ocean and the harm it does to wildlife. And it's easy to blame the companies, but we use the plastics. And I haven't switched over, so blame me. We need to move, and plastics does some wonderful stuff. So I'm not a per se anti-plastics, and in the chemical industry, plastic tanks, and there's zillion different kind of plastics, but have really made chemical processing a lot cheaper. And there's plastic pipes, and there's CPVC pipes in your house. So there's legitimate uses for plastics. But there's other uses is just because we're too damn lazy and we're not thoughtful. Like, I should be taking cloth bags to the grocery store and putting my groceries in cloth bags. Yeah, that's a hassle and I can't remember it, but that's just an excuse. I'm not getting it done. We use plastic cups, styrofoam. We pack stuff in plastic. We have bubble wrap that's plastic. And some of those are harder to get rid of and take a lot more effort and planning. Especially the Amazon world. That's a big undertaking, and maybe I can't deal with Amazon directly, except maybe I can buy more from my local hardware store or something. But there's, you got to start somewhere. And if you bother to get the pictures up Sierra Leone, it's a mess. Those container ships are, 110 yards long, and they got stuff packed up to the sky. A lot of stuff on there, and a lot of it's plastic. And apparently they were shipping some kind of plastic resin somewhere. Okay, that's the first environmental story in the news. Second environmental story in the news is Exxon. And this is a big one. There's a small hedge fund owns less than 1% of Exxon shares, and it convinced some of the big retirement funds to cast a vote for some activist candidates. And so they put two people onto the board of Exxon. And I have Exxon stock. And the board of they want to move Exxon more toward renewable energy. Now, I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that. Now, I'll say why. I don't think that Exxon is necessarily the right company and has the right people, although they can hire the right people. So that, they can do a major shift by bringing in expertise from the outside. So maybe I'll change my mind. Maybe that's a way for them to approach it. But they don't have the culture and they don't have the expertise to necessarily switch to renewable energies. They might have the culture to maybe get a thorium reactor going. I mean, there's that kind of expertise, uh, and oil refining expertise is not so far different. Like, I don't have reactor experience, but I have chemical processing experience, and I could be part of a team. I would never get the job because the the headhunter and the secretary screening the resumes wouldn't understand the common skill set. But Exxon could do a thorium reactor. However, America has not yet accepted the fact that you need to make a transition away from carbon. You need a big boy, a big player in there for making energy that my opinion is we're just not going to do it with renewable yet. We don't have the battery technology to store energy overnight. And we don't have the ability to have the wild swings of power generation and still keep, this country operating. We certainly don't have the grid system, and making all that happen in a kind of time frame we need to happen is just, I've done enough large projects in my life to know that, this is like a zillion large projects all at the same time. And our government does not have the expertise, and they're not smart enough to pass a carbon tax and make the market push. So, yeah, maybe an Exxon can play a role in a thorium reactor. Okay, then anyway, it's happening. They're getting pressure. They're going to have someone on the inside, and it's probably good. Get a little bit more balance. Exxon fought it the whole way, and they lost. It's still not over because two people isn't enough to change it, but it's enough to, it's like a grain of salt under the skin, or in a pearl. I mean, it's in an oyster to make a pearl. So it's a good move. Number 3, environmental. Shell. Shell has very ambitious plans. They're in somewhere in Europe, Switzerland or Netherlands. Netherlands, probably. I don't know. But they have very aggressive plans to switch over to renewable energies and to phase out oil, something by 50% reduction by the end of this decade, which is super ambitious for an oil company. I mean, that's just super ambitious for anybody. I from where I sit, I think it's impossible, but maybe I'm wrong. But somebody took them to court, and the court ruled that they had to take another 40% reduction by the end of this decade. I actually still don't think that's as good as having a carbon tax and letting the market figure out how to sort it out. But it shows the rising pressure against oil and that it's becoming mainstream. Now, will that court ruling stand up? Who knows? It can be appealed, and it will be. And it's kind of punishing the one company that's the big oil company that's the most aggressive. So that seems kind of perverse. Now I had and Chevron got one member elected to its board. So there's a big worldwide push away from carbon. And it's interesting that a lot of it's coming through the corporate structure. Now, we tend to blame corporations for all the sins of society and that they're the bad guys. But corporations are just made up of people like us that walk the planet, rub shoulders with us. You walk by them in the grocery store. You see them in the restaurant when you go out to eat. Uh, they even take their kids to McDonald's. Imagine that. And the attitudes they have may be different than yours, and they may be a little more pro oil because oil puts money in their pockets, buys them their house, feeds their kids. So, yeah, they're going to be more biased toward that. And if you were there getting that paycheck, and probably a good paycheck, um, don't be so sure that you wouldn't find a way to make it okay with yourself. And there's still a lot of stuff the oil companies do and make that we need to keep this society going. Now, Shell, if the court ruling holds up and they have to divest themselves of more oil, because Shell is also being held responsible for the oil, the gasoline that you burn in your car. That seems a little ludicrous to me. You can't blame anybody for what you burn in your car except you, me. And I'll tell you about that in a second, what I'm doing. And the consequence of if the court ruling holds up at the next level for Shell, the consequence won't be that there'll be less oil pulled out of the ground unless when you cut Shell out. What will happen is, some third world country will buy the oil from Shell in the ground, buy their reserves. They will take it out of the ground and they will pollute the planet many times over. Shell's a good company and it's run well. They follow the law. I've seen this. I saw this happen in the minerals business. We pushed copper and zinc and lead and everything else out of this country with the idea that not in my backyard, and we are environmentally sound, noble people that want the best for the planet. Well, that's all bunk. It got pushed to third world countries, and I guarantee you the planet has a lot more contamination, toxic metals, both in the ground and the air and the water because of our pushing it out of the United States. Now, could we have gradually toughened up the laws and made them tighter in the US? Yeah. Places like Germany do an excellent job. And that's where the US would have been by now. We started doing this in the 70s and we pushed it out to China, who pollutes the hell out of the planet, Korea, South Korea, of course, Vietnam. We probably factor of 100 or 1,000 more pollution because of that attitude. Doing it to Shell will do the same thing. And you can be noble and the environmentalists can, think they're doing great things, but it's not how it works. Okay, deep breath. Get off my soapbox. I've got a car that I think everybody ought to have one. It's a Honda Clarity. It's really hard to get a hold of this part of the country. I live in the Maryland. It's a hybrid, a plug-in hybrid. It goes 50 miles on a battery charge. I plug it in the evening and it's ready to go in the morning. If it's completely empty, it takes about 12 hours. Most of the time it's, I've driven 20 miles a day before and it takes, 5 hours, whatever. But I mean, it takes a few hours to charge it up for my days driving. Let's say 6. I don't know what the exact number is, but that kind of number. I've had the car now for 5 months. I put about $20 of gas in it, and those are for trips. Like I go down to Baltimore or Washington, D.C. Baltimore is about 50 miles. So I get my trip down there. I don't quite get it because when you're driving at 70, I don't get 50 miles out of it. When I'm driving local, I get 50, but when you go 70, which also shows a higher energy requirement for going faster. I drive 72 miles an hour. Only get about 40 miles. So I get most of the trip down there, and then coming back, I use gasoline. And then the car gets like 45 miles per gallon. So I use a gallon of gas coming back from work. I go to take my daughter to the airport in Philadelphia. I use a gallon of gas. So I've used, 4 or 5 gallons, and, I'm using a gallon or 2 a month. Going on vacation, whoa, I might use 10 gallons. 50, I might probably more than that. 10, let's see, 1,000 miles. Let's say 100 would be 10 gallons, 20 gallons, 20 gallons of gas. Let's be generous, 30 gallons of gas every year. Anyway, I'm not using much gas. That car cost me, I got it used, so it cost me about $20,000, which is pretty reasonable cost. My fuel costs are, halfish using electricity. That electricity was from renewable or from nuclear, like a thorium reactor. That would be a big chunk out of my CO2 emissions. Now, if you had a carbon tax, then I would be well rewarded for that investment, because I would not be paying a carbon tax most days. I can also sign up, which I haven't found the right company, but I'm going to sign up for a solar company to supply enough power to the grid to take supply my energy for my house and my car. Although that's very limited because we can't all go to solar and renewables because our grid can't take it. And I'm not convinced the Republicans are going to pass the huge bill that Biden has for infrastructure. And I actually don't agree with it. It's too big, too much. I just don't trust the government managing $2 trillion worth of expenditures well. And I think they're doing it back-assward by not just getting the market to do it. I think the market can do it better than our government can do it. So I take kind of well, it's not the Republican view either, because they're not going to put a carbon tax to make the market do it. So I guess I'm on nobody's side at the moment. So we got environmental stuff going on. Exxon, Shell, Chevron, Sri Lanka. Those are the important stories that I thought today. There's other stuff going on. Black Lives Matter stuff. Still pandemic stuff going on. Still Trump stuff going on. Crossing my fingers how that goes. But it's a Friday, May 28th. may not agree with me, but I think he'll admit that my opinions are different than you get other places. This is the Ancient Texan, hoping you have a good day and that you think for yourself and you get some people that have different expertise talking to you. And I hope we can all spread a little love today. This is the Ancient Texan. Namaste.